During the semester, I'm going to be posting main questions for the different modules, and oftentimes there'll be a video that goes along with them. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the most important things that we'll do during the semester. And this is all about the idea of questions. This class, if you've taken a class with me before, you know that the thing that I consider the most important thing you'll get from a college education is the ability to ask better questions. So we will be focusing on the kinds of questions we ask. I'm going to be asking you to produce questions for each of the readings, and I think you'll see by the end of the semester that this is really the best way to approach such a complex issue, is to kind of think about what are the things we don't know about this yet, what are the things that we need to ask about in order to understand better. So I want to start with some questions for our class today. We start with, how do we arrive at our values? It's an interesting question. When you think about the term ethics, as you all know, ethics means what's right and what's wrong. It's the determination of the right thing to do and doing the right thing regarding anything. But in this case, it's about human beings making the choices to do the right things, or arguing about what is the right thing to do in relation to our environment. And how do we arrive at our values in general? When I've done this class in face-to-face, which I've done for many years now, we always have a very interesting and good long conversation about arriving at values. Frequently people will say, well, our families give us our values, or our society gives us our values, or it could be our church gives us our values, or it's the members of our community who give us our values, or what have you. Or maybe we get our values from specific individuals who seem to have some kind of authority about that. But that's a super important question, and it's one that we'll be asking. It's going to be at the center of pretty much everything we do, is talking about human values and what do we value more highly than other things. Next thing that we're going to talk about is, how do we see nature? And by seeing, you can see that I've put it in italics. Because when I'm talking about seeing in this instance, we'll talk about this again a little bit further down, I'm talking about it from the perspective of more than just what visually appears before our eyes. It's not just about phenomenon, but it's about what goes on in our head as we look at the world. So that's a very important question that will come up again and again, and we'll read some really good pieces that will focus us on that idea of perception and how do we change our perceptions, especially when we're looking at nature. And then the environment. Is it a general thing? What is it? What do we include in the environment? What are the parts? Is it something that we can only speak about as specific environments, or can we think in terms of the general environment? We'll be bringing up the concept of the Anthropocene during the semester. It'll come up several times, and we'll be talking about that. And some of you have probably already heard of this idea that we have now entered an epoch that is focused on things created by humans. So that's why we call it the Anthropocene. It's the period, the epoch that is the main primary way that epoch is changed or altered is through human activity. So when we think about the environment, what are the parts that make up the environment? We know we have lakes, we have oceans, we have mountains, we have rivers, we have flora and fauna, we have trees and animals, we have all these plants, we have the center of the earth that sometimes pushes molten lava up through volcanic eruptions, we get tsunamis from earthquakes, we have plate tectonics. What are the parts that make up the environment? They're vast, they're tiny. When you start to read E.O. Wilson's Half Earth, you'll start to see some of his description of very small things. Wilson was an entomologist, somebody who studies ants primarily, but insects, but he focuses primarily on ants, and some of the things that somebody like Wilson has to understand about nature and the environment are so tiny and so small as to be on really the molecular level. Like, what does an ant smell? How do ants know to walk on certain trails, and how do they know what to do? And I'll put up an interesting article that I just saw from Wilson. It was in Sunday's New York Times, and I'll put it up for you. Okay, and then what are animals to us? This is going to be a very important question, and we'll spend a good couple of weeks reading animal stories and talking about animals. Animals are going to come up again and again and again, and for a very good reason. Much of our environmental legislation that was created in the 1960s and 70s focuses on animals, like the Endangered Species Act. Why are animals so close at the center of these issues with our environmental ethics? Okay, are we ourselves animals? That's an interesting question. That's one that we'll be talking about quite a bit in the future, and I think that some of you are like me. You will understand that scientifically we are animals. We're part of the animal kingdom. But that question of whether humans are like the rest of the animals in the animal kingdom is an interesting one. We'll get into this too. How do words affect the way we see the world around us? Let's just think of this concept of an alien, a native species versus an alien species. And when we say something is an alien species, we're saying that it's from outside, right? And when we say it's invasive, it's almost like it's an invader. So, and we'll talk about this quite a bit during the semester, and you've seen this around you when you see the European beach grass, or you see the pampas grass or other things, the Scotch broom. These are invasive species. And when we call something exotic, that changes the way we think about it. It means the same thing. It means it's from outside, but it also changes, and we have some good connotations with the concept of exotic, but where we talk about something being alien or invasive, we have generally bad connotations. So how does the language that we use to describe things affect the way we see the world around us? And then what is worthy of our concern? How do we decide whether one thing, one animal, is more important to us than another? One tree is more important than another. Why do some things become iconic? Why do they stand out vastly in our mental imagery and become super important to us as cultures? So, if super important here, how do our ethics change? Do they change from the top down? Do they change over long periods? Do they change in smaller subcultures first? How have they changed in the past? We're going to look at some historical documents about the environment, and we'll think about how our ethics have changed in the past and how might they change in the future. It's an important question that this class that we'll ask in this question is, where are we going from here? We all know that there are plenty of problems and issues that we have to deal with, that we have to face up to, but thinking about how things might change in the future is super important to us, and we'll be talking about that in this class. Finally, how does inquiry help us to understand the world and our role in it? How do questions work? What is a good question? Why is one question better or more productive than another? We'll dive right into that next week, this coming week, and I'm asking you to think about that, and I'm asking you to produce questions, and we'll work on those in our small class discussions and in larger class discussions throughout the semester. We'll think about that. That's what I'm going to primarily be asking you to do, is to hone, to sharpen the blade that you use to cut into issues, so that, and then the blades that you use are your questions. So we'll be thinking about the kinds of questions that we ask, and you'll be producing them, I'll be producing them, and we'll hopefully have a really good exchange regarding our questions. Finally, what is education for? As we're sitting here now online, and we've all been pushed online by the coronavirus, we have to ask ourselves, why are we being educated? What is the purpose behind it? Is it so that we can fit into some role in a society, in some kind of larger machine? Or is it for the individual value of each individual human being? Is it for the democracy? Is it for political systems? And what are the things that matter in our educations? What are the things that people should be educated in? And then who decides those things? All those questions will be coming up again and again during the semester, and this is just a little bit of an introduction into questions and questions about the environment and questions that we'll be asking all semester.